In an extraordinary turn of events, federal judge Arthur Brennan ordered the removal of Donald Trump's lead attorney, Emil Bowe III, from the courtroom during a pre-trial hearing on January 17th. This wasn't a minor dispute or a routine procedural issue. It was a shocking confrontation that escalated beyond the boundaries of normal courtroom procedure. Witnesses have described the scene as one of the most explosive courtroom moments in modern American legal history. What makes this moment so critical is that Judge Brennan, a sitting federal judge, felt compelled to call in U.S. Marshals to physically escort a member of the defense team out of the courtroom. This was not a small misunderstanding. It was a blatant breakdown in trust between the bench and the defense team. When a judge reaches this point, it signifies something far larger than a simple dispute. This is a significant event that shakes the foundation of courtroom order. This decision didn't come out of nowhere. Tensions between the defense and the court had been building for months. There had been repeated violations in the discovery process, missed deadlines, and actions that prosecutors had described as deliberate attempts to obstruct the legal proceedings. The legal community had already begun to recognize that something was fundamentally wrong when such delays and evasions were happening on a regular basis. But everything came to a head on January 17th. The defense team, led by Bowe, had been on thin ice for some time due to these violations, but it was their handling of a direct order from Judge Brennan that finally pushed things too far. The issue at hand was simple: whether Trump would comply with the document production deadline set by the court. The judge had asked Bowe for a clear answer, and what followed was nothing short of a standoff. Bowe, despite being asked 7 times in quick succession, refused to answer directly. Each time, he attempted to deflect the question, citing pending appeals, claims of executive privilege, and procedural objections. This back and forth escalated quickly, with Judge Brennan growing increasingly frustrated. It was at this point that the judge, who had been calm and measured until now, made it clear he would no longer tolerate such evasiveness. "Yes or no?" Judge Brennan demanded, his voice stern, leaving no room for further deflection. But Bowe continued to evade, and it became clear that the judge was losing patience. It wasn't just a question of legal tactics anymore. This was about respect for the court and its authority. This breakdown in communication would set the stage for one of the most dramatic moments of the entire trial. After 7 refusals, Judge Brennan had enough. With the room holding its breath, he declared, "Mr. Bowe, I have given you 7 opportunities to provide a direct answer to a direct question. Your continued evasion leaves me no choice but to conclude that you are either unable or unwilling to engage with this court in good faith." The word "unwilling" hung heavily in the air. Moments later, the judge made his final decision. Emil Bowe III was ordered to leave the courtroom immediately. "Under my authority, pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 44, Brennan said, I am finding you in contempt and ordering your immediate removal from these proceedings. You are barred from appearing in this courtroom until further notice." At this moment, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. This was no ordinary hearing. Emil Bowe III, lead counsel for the former President of the United States, was escorted out by U.S. Marshals. This unprecedented event was far more than a simple legal disagreement. It was a clear message that even the most powerful figures in American politics must adhere to the rules of the court. If you thought this was a typical courtroom drama, think again. This is a defining moment in the legal battle surrounding former President Trump. The legal community is watching closely to see how this unfolds and whether this event sets a new precedent for handling obstruction and contempt in high-profile cases. Don't miss out on the next chapter. Hit that subscribe button now to stay updated on this ongoing legal saga. The consequences of this decision will reverberate throughout the courtroom and beyond, and we'll be here to break it all down for you. The tension in Judge Brennan's courtroom was palpable as the defense team, led by Emil Bowe III, continued to flout the court's orders. What started as a typical pre-trial hearing was rapidly escalating into something far more significant. The defense's failure to comply with the court's directives was not just frustrating, it was raising serious questions about the integrity of their conduct. Emil Bowe III, the lead attorney representing former President Trump, had already been given multiple chances to respond directly to the court's requests. Yet, time and time again, he chose to deflect, pushing back against the straightforward questions posed by Judge Brennan. This wasn't a small misstep. And it wasn't simply a legal disagreement. The behavior exhibited by Bo wasn't just about legal tactics or zealous representation. It was about a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between the defense team and the bench. Court observers noted that the deflections weren't minor. They weren't the usual objections or motions you might see in any contentious legal battle. These were refusals to provide a direct, simple answer. Would Trump's legal team comply with the January 31st deadline for document production? After the second deflection, Judge Brennan issued a warning, but things didn't improve. As the minutes ticked by, the tension grew more pronounced. Each time Bo deflected, it was as if he was testing the limits of the judge's patience. The entire room was on edge, knowing that things were about to reach a boiling point. For those present, it was clear this wasn't just another routine hearing. This was an escalation that threatened to unravel the court proceedings and severely disrupt the process. By the time the fifth and sixth refusals occurred, you could feel the pressure mounting. The defense team seemed increasingly agitated. Bo was shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact with the judge, and his answers became more convoluted. His refusal to engage directly with Judge Brennan's simple question left the court with no choice but to seriously reconsider how to proceed. The deflections were not just procedural missteps. They were undermining the authority of the court and disrespecting the judicial process. Witnesses in the courtroom later described the scene as physically tense. The courtroom was filled with a sense of anticipation. You could see the marshals shifting their weight in anticipation of what might come next. The courtroom, usually filled with quiet murmurs and the occasional shuffle of papers, had become a stage for a legal confrontation of unprecedented proportions. The entire situation was rapidly spiraling toward a breaking point, and it was clear that something catastrophic was on the horizon. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as Judge Brennan's patience reached its breaking point. He stared directly at Emil Bo III, the lead defense attorney, his expression stern. The entire room, filled with journalists, sketch artists, and members of the public, seemed to hold their breath. The judge's voice cut through the stillness. "Mr. Bo, I am going to ask you directly, and I expect a direct answer. Will your client comply with the January 31st document production deadline as currently ordered?" For a moment, Bo hesitated, shuffling papers on the table, avoiding eye contact with the bench. His mind raced for a way to sidestep the question once again. He cleared his throat and replied, "Your Honor, we have filed a motion for reconsideration that addresses the timeline concerns, and..." Before Bo could finish his sentence, Judge Brennan interjected, his tone sharp. "That is not an answer," he said coldly. "Yes or no, will you comply?" The force of the judge's words echoed in the room, each syllable reinforcing the mounting pressure. Bo faltered again. His hands were visibly shaking as he glanced toward his colleagues for support. But the words came out once more, deflecting the question. "We are still awaiting a ruling on the motion, Your Honor," he said, his voice slightly strained. The judge's patience was already worn thin, but this was the moment where it would finally snap. Brennan's voice, previously measured, now carried a stern authority. "I have asked you 7 times, he said, his words deliberate, each one punctuating the growing frustration. "Will you comply with this court's order?" The silence in the room was deafening. It wasn't just the question that lingered. It was the weight of the defiance that had built up. The judge had already provided every opportunity for Bo to answer directly. Yet the defense attorney's repeated evasion seemed deliberate. At this point, the judge's expression hardened. He set his pen down with a quiet but deliberate motion, signaling the finality of his decision. "Mr. Bo," Judge Brennan said, his voice now carrying an undeniable authority, "I have given you 7 opportunities to provide a direct answer to a direct question. Your continued evasion leaves me no choice but to conclude that you are either unable or unwilling to engage with this court in good faith." The word "unwilling" lingered in the air, as heavy as a sentence. Bo stood motionless, stunned. The room was charged with tension. Even the marshals stationed by the doors shifted their weight in preparation. Brennan paused for a brief moment, then made the decision that would forever be etched into the courtroom's history. "Under my authority, pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 44 and the inherent powers of this court, I am finding you in contempt and ordering your immediate removal from these proceedings. You are barred from appearing in this courtroom until further notice." The impact was immediate. Bo's face drained of color as the gravity of the situation sank in. "Your Honor, I must object in the strongest possible terms," he stammered, his voice faltering. The judge, however, remained unmoved, his hand already signaling to the marshals. "Your objection is noted for the record," Judge Brennan said, his tone final. "You have 60 seconds to gather your materials." As Bo hurriedly gathered his papers, the weight of the moment hung heavily over the room. Judge Brennan called a brief recess, and the reality of what had just transpired began to settle in. The removal of the lead attorney from a case involving a former president was unprecedented. The courtroom was still buzzing with disbelief as the marshals escorted Bo out, but the message was clear. The line had been crossed. This was no ordinary courtroom dispute. It was a dramatic rupture, signaling something far larger than any individual case. The confrontation, long simmering, had now reached its explosive climax. Bo's failure to comply, his refusal to be forthcoming with the court, had triggered a response that would reverberate far beyond this trial. As the door closed behind him, the courtroom was left in stunned silence, the full weight of the moment hanging in the air. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak as Judge Brennan, after 7 failed attempts to get a direct answer from defense attorney Emil Bo III, took a drastic and unprecedented step. The room fell silent as the judge, visibly frustrated, declared, "Mr. Bo, I have given you 7 opportunities to provide a direct answer to a direct question. Your continued evasion leaves me no choice but to conclude that you are either unable or unwilling to engage with this court in good faith." The words "unwilling" hung in the air, causing an audible shift in the atmosphere of the courtroom. The urgency of the moment was palpable, and everyone in the gallery understood that this was no ordinary judicial proceeding. As soon as Judge Brennan spoke those words, the atmosphere turned tense. Several marshals positioned themselves near the rear doors, prepared for what was about to unfold. Judge Brennan's voice cut through the silence. "Under my authority, pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 44 and the inherent powers of this court, I am finding you in contempt and ordering your immediate removal from these proceedings. You are barred from appearing in this courtroom until further notice." Emil Bo's face drained of color, the gravity of the moment sinking in. His voice faltered as he objected. "Your Honor, I must object in the strongest possible terms." But the judge was already signaling to the marshals. "You have 60 seconds to gather your materials," Judge Brennan commanded firmly. And the room was filled with the sound of papers being shuffled and chairs being moved. As Bo hastily packed his things, the courtroom was in a state of shock. This wasn't just a typical legal dispute, it was a monumental breach of courtroom decorum, an action that had the potential to alter the course of not just this case, but future legal battles. The gavel came down, signaling a recess. "This hearing is in recess for 15 minutes, Judge Brennan declared, as Bo, still in disbelief, was escorted out. The removal of a lead defense attorney in a case involving a former president is something we have never seen before in modern American legal history. This was not simply a minor procedural issue. It was a declaration that the legal process could not and would not be manipulated. The moment marked a critical juncture, one that would resonate beyond this particular trial. Now, the question remains, what will the defense team do next? How will this alter the dynamics of this case moving forward? The actions taken today will have a ripple effect in Trump's other ongoing legal battles. Stay tuned as the drama continues to unfold. If you're following this groundbreaking moment in American legal history, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for the latest updates. As the tension in the courtroom reached its peak, the legal repercussions of Judge Brennan's decision became evident almost immediately. The ejection of Trump's lead attorney, Emil Bo III, marked a turning point in the case that would ripple through the defense team's strategy. The first immediate impact was the realization that the defense team would have to reorganize without their lead counsel, at least for this courtroom. This abrupt change created a logistical nightmare for the team, as they were already under tight deadlines, and now, replacing Bo in the midst of ongoing proceedings would be no easy task. With the trial proceeding at an accelerated pace, every delay was seen as an obstacle, and this new shift only added to the pressure. The coordination of the defense team was at risk of unraveling, and the prosecution was quick to capitalize on this disruption. Any further delays or missteps from the defense would undoubtedly be viewed as self-inflicted, and the prosecution was already preparing to argue that these were tactics designed to obstruct the legal process. The legal consequences extended beyond the defense team's immediate challenges. The removal of Bowe set a dangerous precedent, one that would likely be scrutinized by judges across the country. Legal experts and analysts were already observing the situation closely, wondering whether this bold action by Judge Brennan would encourage other judges to take a firmer stance against what they perceived as obstructionist tactics. If Judge Brennan's authority was upheld, it would send a clear message that the courts would no longer tolerate any form of evasion or delay, especially in high-profile cases like this one. The ripple effect wasn't just confined to the courtroom. Inside Trump's broader legal orbit, there was a sense of urgency. Attorneys from other cases involving Trump reportedly held emergency conference calls to discuss the fallout from this unprecedented event. Some advocated for doubling down, challenging Judge Brennan's authority with immediate appeals, while others warned against further confrontation, advising a shift in strategy to avoid alienating other judges. It was clear that the situation was far from over and that this decision would have lasting consequences, not just for Trump's defense team, but for his entire legal strategy moving forward. With the legal and political landscape shifting rapidly, the defense was now caught between two difficult realities. They had to continue representing their client zealously, as the profession demands, but they also had to navigate the growing distrust from the court. Every filing, every statement in court, would now be viewed through a lens of suspicion, making their position increasingly difficult to defend. The battle wasn't just in the courtroom, it was becoming a fight for credibility, and the stakes had never been higher. As the courtroom doors slammed shut, the ripples of the shocking event echoed far beyond the walls of the federal building. Trump's legal team, already on edge after the ejection of their lead attorney, was left in disarray. The atmosphere quickly turned heated, with frustration boiling over into a full-blown political firestorm. It wasn't just about the legal ramifications. It became a matter of power, perception, and retaliation. Trump, watching from the sidelines, wasted no time in taking to his platform, unleashing a barrage of attacks against Judge Brennan. He labeled the judge as a radical leftist and a puppet of Biden, a claim that painted the ejection as a politically motivated assault on his legal defense. In a series of posts, Trump didn't just challenge the decision, he distorted it, accusing the justice system of being rigged against him. The harsh words were amplified by his supporters, who rallied behind him with cries of judicial persecution. To them, this wasn't just a legal setback, it was a sign of deeper, more sinister forces working to undermine his every move. His followers flooded social media, calling the ejection proof that the legal system had been weaponized against him, painting the courtroom confrontation as a broader conspiracy to silence him. But the outrage didn't stop with Trump's posts. Members of his legal team, speaking in hushed tones behind closed doors, were furious. The ejection had humiliated them, and they feared the consequences. They knew that this was more than just a setback. It was a direct challenge to their strategy of delay, obfuscation, and tactical deflections. In private conversations, some argued for doubling down, seeking to file immediate appeals to challenge Judge Brennan's authority. Others, more pragmatic, recognized the danger of further confrontation, suggesting that escalating the conflict could alienate not only the judge, but other members of the legal community as well. It was clear now, the stakes had risen. Trump's refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing, combined with his fervent defense of his team, had only intensified the situation. His words were no longer just a political defense, they were a rallying cry to those who believed in his vision of a system skewed against him. The legal community, however, was not as easily swayed. Behind the scenes, whispers began to circulate that this was the moment when Trump's defiance might break the legal system's patience once and for all. As the day wore on, the fury from Trump's camp only grew. The ejection, rather than being seen as a procedural issue, had now become a full-blown political battle. But there was no turning back. The damage was done. The legal team was scattered, with trust broken and tactics in disarray. Meanwhile, Trump's ongoing public attacks on the judiciary served only to reinforce the image of a man determined to fight, no matter the cost to his legal proceedings. As the dust settles from the courtroom showdown, the implications of Judge Brennan's decision are clear. But what does this mean for the future? This moment has sparked a larger conversation about the integrity of legal proceedings and whether courts can maintain authority when faced with powerful figures. The ejection of Trump's lead attorney is not just an isolated incident, but a crucial signal that the boundaries of legal practice are being tested. It raises the question: can courts hold individuals of great political stature to the same standards of accountability we've relied on for decades? In Trump's case, the stakes are high, involving not just legal issues, but his public image and political future. This decision could influence how judges approach similar cases, especially with growing concerns about powerful figures evading consequences. The removal of Trump's attorney also carries political weight, shaping public perception of his tactics and the disregard for legal processes. This is especially impactful among swing voters in future elections, as it further undermines Trump's credibility. Judges nationwide are closely watching this case. If Brennan's actions stand, it will signal strong support for judicial authority in the face of obstruction. However, if overruled, it could embolden defense teams to push the limits. This moment could define the future of legal accountability in America. Stay tuned as the consequences unfold. What do you think about the court's handling of this situation? Do you believe this could set a precedent for how future cases are dealt with? Drop your thoughts below and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the ongoing updates.